401H trim installation. Okay. There's a few concepts, page 2, like is always with definitions and stuff, very important to me. So the first thing I want you to know is trim basically hides all joints. The rationale or the reason to have trim is that it hides joints. Joints are a problem because a building moves. We're going to have expansion and contraction no matter what. Yeah. H. The trim installation. Page 2. All buildings move, and even if I can make that joint perfect, think of 10 years from now of expanding and contracting, there's going to be a crack, and I want to hide that. So trim does the best at masking all those and makes it look very pretty. So I'd like you to know that. Also, that picture, there's the chair rail, that top picture on page 2. That piece of white banding that goes across the room that you can imagine is about waist high is called a chair rail. So that would be if I put a chair against the wall, I'm not going to mash up the wall, the plaster, the wallpaper or something like that. Yeah. You just put chair rail on? Yeah, right on. At your house? Yeah. So for those that looked, a few of us stayed after when we went to Wood Millers, and one of the thickest, biggest pieces of trim on their wall there behind the boulder shaper was a massive piece of chair rail, and those are for retirement homes. And the reason they use that is exactly the same, except even more abuse, more industrial use. So think of a gurney. I'm pushing a patient down the hallway on a gurney, and I bump the gurney into a wall, or I'm coming around a corner and we smuck into the wall. I could literally put the corner of the bed through the wall. So it's almost like a big bumper, a big piece to protect it. And anyway, if I showed them, if you could hear me, it was kind of a hard place to have a communication, was Wood Millers. But on the back side of almost all trim, it's hollowed out. And remember, we call that you're breaking the back, or you're hollowing the trim. And the reason for that, and this is a test question, is because that prevents it from warping or twisting. I'm going to hollow the back of a piece of trim out because when I put it flat on the wall, I don't want it to cup, warp, twist, all those kind of things. I want it to lay flat. And by hollowing that out, it makes it much, much more stable. Kind of think of the smile or the frown or the rainbow with cutting boards. We're cutting the strength out of that by removing all those growth rings.
Is that like the 3 little channels on the back?
Yep.
Pieces? Okay.
So you can see on that picture on the center of page 2, it's kind of like it's one big hollow, almost like an M shape.
Okay.
You see it?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. It's just you're kind of cutting that out. Okay. So the first one is we're hiding joints. Second one is we hollowed out the back to keep warping, twisting, cupping, all that kind of stuff. And the third thing I want you to know is, oh yeah, that's nice. You emailed it to me. That's cool. The third one is most trim that's big is built up. You can write that down. Big trim equals built up. Built dash up. And I'll explain that. I'll see you guys Monday.
See ya.
This came out of the Mount, the nunnery that is just up on Mount Edward Road, that is now Synergy and all that other stuff. This was a crown mold that was in there, and I'll pass it around so you can see for yourself. But it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of wood from the side profile that are built up to look like that. And I'd have to use a massive bunch of lumber to cut this out of one piece. And B, and more importantly, just like your cutting board, one piece of wood like this is very, very unstable. Where I have cross grain and they're stabilizing each other to build it like that. So I'll pass that around. And that is massive trim that we call built up, built-UP.
Do you build it up on site or in long strips?
Typically, we build it up in long strips here in the shop
And then bring it?
and bring 8, 10, 12 footers to the site and then cut them up as we require them, most of the time. Page 3. The next thing I want you to know is crown mold. The other name for crown mold is cornice. So the reason I want you to know that is sometimes it's called that, especially older carpenters. So it's C-O-R-N-I-C-E, cornice. As you can see, the different configurations there. It goes, it's protecting the gap from the wall to the ceiling, but it is also on the top of cupboards, which means it's free floating. Yeah. C-O-R-N-I-C-E. Cornice. Cornice. Page 4, baseboard. We don't need to get into that. Page 5 is wall capping. So here's a wall cap. I have a wall here. We would call this a knee wall. It doesn't go all the way up. And I have it capped. Because if I tore this off and I looked down in there, there'd be cinder block, concrete subwall, all that kind of ugly stuff. So again, I'm hiding that joint and making it look pretty. Page 6 is a test question. So wainscoting. Wainscoting is also, you'll hear people call it beadboard. So that's trim that's hung on the wall. Nowadays it's all MDF, it's all sheet good that has notches carved in it, the beads carved in it. Old school, it used to be tongue and groove wood, very thin, small tongue and groove wood, which would make that same picture, which you see on the bottom of page 6. And what I want you to know on that is just like this cap, on a minor level, wainscoting has a cap too. So it acts, if you see that bottom picture on page 6, it looks like a chair rail, but it's also hiding the gap, the wood end grain of the top of the wainscoting. Does that make sense? So the test question would be, where would I find wainscoting cap? And the answer would be on the top of the wainscoting. Why would I hang it? To hide the joint, hide the end grain, something like that. Of the wainscoting, the panels. Think of it as panels, I guess. Okay, and then kind of back to Mandy's question, on page 7, we have a fireplace, and that fireplace is built up. So now I have a piece that isn't built in the shop, it's probably built on site, and I'm building up multiple pieces. And you can see, as I go from top to bottom, it says top trimmed, then cornice mold, then dental mold, base, astragal, etc. All those are separate pieces that I'm applying to the box that used to be a very plain square for the fireplace, and I'm just building it up. I think it would be almost impossible to carve that out of one solid piece of wood, and it would crack and warp and twist. So making it out of multiple pieces is really important.
You would expect us to know these words?
No, I just want you to know that's true or false. Most fireplaces are built up. Stairwells. Stairwells are important to us because they go from top to bottom. So you can just listen. I'm not going to test you on this. But trim will go from the second floor down to the first floor. So if I have a chair rail that I want to follow, now all of a sudden I'm hanging it on an angle. So I want to be aware, obviously, that now I'm usually doing complex compound angles because I'm going down and around corners, etc. Page 9, really important, test question. You need proper space and proper setup to do a good job. You, the finished carpenter, should demand a proper space, and a proper shop to do good work. So you shouldn't just be outside in the rain, you shouldn't be in the back of a pickup truck. You need a big open space to do proper joints and proper work, which is kind of what you see the picture on page 9.
Unless you build a timber frame and you're gonna be inside.
Then you're definitely gonna be outside. Page 10. Two things I want you to know. When you have miters, those pictures on page 10 are 90-degree miters, so two 45s that come together to make a 90. And we have inside and outside corner on both dimensions. So you can see the top two pictures, inside, outside corner of laying the trim on flat, and two corners, inside and outside corner, with the trim on edge on the bottom picture. All of them are 45, 45, 90 corners, and they're just from different perspectives for different trim, etc. So what I want you to know on a test question, miters should always be glued and nailed. When I'm hanging trim and I cut my miters, I'm gluing and nailing them. True or false? That's absolutely true. And when I'm cutting trim, I'm bisecting the angle. So what do I do with a piece of trim that is 110 degrees? I bisect it. Good with that? I'm bisecting angles. I'm cutting them exactly in half.
What was the question for that?
I just made it up. It's something like that. When you have an angle, how do I decide what each half of the trim of the miter is? The answer is bisect, which means cut exactly in half. Page 11, when possible, test question, coping is always a better joint than a miter. When can I use a miter? When can I do a cope joint? Inside or
Inside.
outside corner?
Inside corner.
Only inside, yeah. So if it's an outside corner, we can't talk about cope. It's not relevant. But if we have an inside corner, we should always do coping because it's far superior. Good? Okay, another test question on the bottom of page 11 are self-returns. When the question is something like, when a piece of trim ends on itself, what is that called? Or when I want to bring a piece of trim to an end, what do I call that? And the answer is self-return. And you can see 4 different examples of that. Well, the top 3 are professional and the bottom one is garbage. The bottom one, they just did a butt cut and painted it, so I would not recommend that. But technically, it's one way to do it. Good? Okay, page 12, it's not on the test, but I'll show it to you because 99% chance if you're gonna work on a crew, postgraduate, and you work on a modern house, your corners will look like this. They have rounded corners instead of sharp 90-degree hard corners of an old school house. Most gyprock now is on a rounded edge. And because it's rounded, I can't bring my trim into a 45-45 to make a 90. I'm gonna go 22 and a half, 22 and a half, 22 and a half, 22 and a half, and that adds up to 90. And that's what you see on the right side of the picture on page 12. I'm basically making a 45-degree turn on that corner, and by doing that, I'm cutting both pieces of trim in half. They do make that center picture that's blacked out with the corner molding. They do make trim that's rounded, but it's very expensive, and you'd have to know how many to buy, etc. So we always just do the picture on the far right. Okay, page 13. I won't test you on it, but remember that was your lab. You need to know really clearly what you're doing. It goes from butt joint to long point, outside edge or inside corner, outside corner, coping, miter. There's you can get one measurement. I need to cut this trim at 93 inches, but there's 100 different ways to cut that 93 inches, and there's only one way to do it right. So I'm very visually oriented, so I draw myself pictures like this. I showed you that in the lab. I would suggest most of you would too. Okay, page 18. No, sorry, 15. The next question should be review. You have an inch that goes into the supporting member. Sorry, I'm talking about nailing. When I'm nailing on trim, I want an inch to go into the supporting member. So an inch goes into the stud, which means if I have 1/2 inch gyprock and 1/2 inch trim, I should be selecting a 2-inch nail. Does that make sense? 1 inch into the supporting member. Also, I want you to write down on this, it's not written in the book, but you need to know this, it's a test question. First, use minimal amount of nails. Minimal amount of nails. And only into supporting members. So I'm not gonna just hang a piece of trim and go bang, 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 because I'm probably shooting just into gyprock. And with my bare fingers, I could tear it off the wall. I need to nail into studs. So minimum amount of nails, nail into studs. Okay, page 17. Page 16 is good to know. I'm not testing you on it, but it's really good to know. Sometimes we do have situations where there's no studs to nail into. I can guarantee behind this wall we don't have any studs. There's just a concrete V-wall. So I have nothing to nail to. So what I would do is if I was putting this corkboard on, what I did was hollow anchors. But what I could also do is take a nail gun and shoot on 45-degree angles. One down, one up, and by being on 45-degree angles, that kind of gives it some grab and gives it something to hold on to. That's what they're showing you on page 16. I'm not testing on that, just letting you know. Okay, page 17, I am testing you on it, and the big word is reveal, R-E-V-E-A-L. Reveal, R-E-V-E-A-L. And I'm basically knowing that I'm human and imperfect, and I'm making it look the prettiest by being imperfect. What do I mean by that? I don't have the best trim examples in here, but if I have this gingerbread cut out, this piece of lace that I'm touching, and it goes onto a backboard, this piece. I have a little gap. You see there's a little step. This lace is a little bit narrower than my back piece, and I've designed it that way perfectly. If I made them both exactly 2 inches, I know that both pieces of wood are gonna move. And so I won't have a perfectly flat piece of wood here come 5-10 years from now, because both pieces are gonna move. So I'll see kind of an ugly gap or wavy line. Does that make sense? Whereas if I have a reveal, this stands more proud than this is the term. If I make it deliberately stand proud, then A, it gives it more depth, more definition, looks more prominent and more pretty. And B, I'm never worried about that joint because they're not supposed to touch, they're not supposed to line up. Does that make sense? So I have a reveal. One test question is when I put trim on my door, so I have my door here, and I hang my trim, this little gap here that I'm touching, that's a reveal. When I hang wood trim on a wood door, because that's metal, I have an 1/8 inch reveal. Test question, how much reveal should I have for wood trim wood door? Answer is 1/8 of an inch. How big should this little gap be, this little step? 1/8 of an inch. So that's almost 3/4 of an inch. That's huge compared to what we do in a wood house residential. Wood house, wood trim, 1/8 inch reveal. I am on to page 20. Now we're going to talk about a couple different types of trim. The first one, the top picture on page 20, has 3 names. The first one is architrave. The next 2 I want you to write down. The second name, same thing, different name, is Boston header. You probably never heard of architrave, but you probably have heard of Boston header.
Is that the same thing?
They're the exact same thing, just different name. And every text you're gonna read calls it an architrave. Most every human you talk to calls it a Boston header. And the third thing, same exact name, same exact product, different name, is a Boston header. Johnny, how about that one, buddy?
Yeah, I like this.
Thank you.
I wasn't bad.
Thank you. Wow, that's the best joke of the year. Just gonna take a moment to appreciate myself. Thank you.
You're peeking here?
This is it. It goes downhill from here. The next type, and you're gonna see a ton of this, I'd say 99% of heritage buildings in PEI have this, is down below, called rosettes. So you can see I have fluted wood. So you see the straight pieces of the trim of the door. I'm on the bottom picture of page 20. Are just flutes. They're beads that stick out on the trim. And then in the corners where they come together, I have a rosette. So what we did back in the day, this is long before you and I were born, we had tons of length of the flutes, of the straight stuff. And then I had, as a carpenter, I had to cut it to length for whatever size door you had. And I had a handsaw. And all I'm gonna do for making a perfect 90-degree miter is screw it up with a handsaw. So the best thing to do is bring a straight piece of wood on a butt cut and a straight piece of wood on a butt cut, and I need something in the middle to fill the gap because there's 2 butt cuts. And what we did was rosettes. So what they had were lumber mills that had a lathe, and they would just pop those rosettes out all day long. And as a carpenter, you would buy 200 of them or whatever the house needed. And that's the reason. It's because they didn't have precision machines back then. So most of homes you're gonna see that are historic in Charlottetown have rosettes. The top picture is our rainbows, and you can cross that out and say ugly, and you're not allowed to use them because they're ugly, which is not an opinion.
They are.
If you think they're pretty,
Don't look fun
you're
to me.
entitled to your wrong opinion.
They're nightmare fuels, what those things are.
I can't imagine bringing that to
And then on the bottom, I want you to know this. So I have a window, and it's not the best example because it's not really what it is. But I have a window, and under it I have a stool, and under that I have trim called an apron. So I think I explained that in class before. If not, I'll explain it again. Easy to remember, stool and apron. When I sit down, I sit on a stool. If I sat in that window opening, I'd be sitting on the stool. And then you kind of wear an apron out front, and that's where the apron is out front. So that's how I remember those. And some have only a stool, some have only an apron, some have both, some have none. So you can't just memorize one or the other. You'll have a combination of that. And very, very generally, the more the more money the house came from, with these historic houses we're going to tour, they would have both. And then the more modest they'd have, they'd have one or the other or none.
Is the stool like having the proud section in practice?
Well,
Is
yes,
its purpose
because
to
the
not have the same
stool,
lineup?
I cut you off, so sorry, I'll let you have it, but the stool does stick out most proud.
So-
That's the nosing of the stool.
So that would be good for hiding mistakes then?
Yeah, and then my apron tucks up underneath it. And if it were the other way around, my apron would stick out. So my stool sticks proud of my apron by design, because if it went the other way, it would look silly, because then I'd have this gap there that you could see. So did that answer your question?
Sure,
Yeah?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you're always hiding, I always say trim is kind of smoke and mirrors. You're just making everything look as pretty as possible, knowing it's not perfect. If you have a house and you're not sure you want the stool and the apron, just get yourself a stool sample and try it, and then you can do the other stool.
That's the worst one of the year.
Stool sample, Johnny?
It's worth it.
You looked at me.
I told you that was when I peeked. So, down we go. Okay, let me go back here and tell you what page. So yeah, page 20, the top is Boston header. And what they don't show you on the Boston header is what they're showing you here. And what they don't show you is what's down at the base. So what's down at the base, and I want you to know this page 22, top picture, is a plinth block, P-L-I-N-T-H, plinth block. And that's right back to Mandy's question. The plinth block stands the most proud of everything. And I'll explain that. So I have my door, Boston header. I have my trim coming down, the casing. And I have my baseboard coming along the bottom. And the casing and the baseboard are going to intersect. And they intersect coming down on top of the plinth block for the casing and going into the side of the plinth block on the baseboard. And because they're intersecting with that, the plinth block better be proud of all that, because I want it to be nice and clear. And you can pretty much see that on page 22 at the top. The plinth block stands the most proud. So it'd be a good test question. If I had casing, baseboard, and plinth block, which is the most proud?
So the doors and
Good.
that
Okay.
reflects to me.
No, it's not, it's true.
Page 26, I'm not testing you on it. We already did crown molding, or again, what they call in textbooks cornices. You can see the most two typical, you worked with 45-degree crown. The other most typical is 38. Mandy just brought crown from her house and it's 40. So I said that it's not, if they custom make it, you can make anything you want. That's the big profile there. So if this is my ceiling and this is my wall, is A correct or B correct? A, because my cove is down. And so the top is, this is a 40-degree and that's a 50-degree, so it adds up to 90. But they made it for, and that came from Woodmillers, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then the other three pictures on page 26 the bottom two are built up. I'm stacking two pieces of crown together, or I'm using two baseboards and a crown, and I'm just making it bigger, more fancy, etc.
You get that, not to just one.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna do some math with you.
Give me a backward one too.
We're going to remain friends, and it's going to be great. So, I'm going to try to do it over here so I don't mess up this. When I have paneling, here's a piece that was in our lunchroom. This came off of the ferry.
Was it the ferry?
Yeah,
The Aberwood?
Abigail.
Or the John Hamlin Grove?
Abigail. This came off the Abigail and it was given to us, and it's the paneling I wanted to talk about. And I think we went upstairs and looked at paneling kind of week one. Did we go on a little walking tour and look at the paneling upstairs?
No.
Yes.
Yeah? So same thing, just saving you folks a walk. So, rail, left and right, stiles, up and down, and panel. We talked at Wood Millers about a shaker style. There's a little cove here, a little fancy beadwork here that I'm rubbing with my finger. If that were just a square cut, nothing fancy at all, I could do everything on the table saw, that would be shaker. Flat panel, flat style and rail. And then I fancied up a little bit and I have this trim where I'm it's called an OG, where I'm rubbing. Sorry? Rail is left to right, horizontal, and style, S-T-I-L-E, up and down. Like Harry.
Like a turnstile.
Is that how Harry spells his name? We don't know. We know he's dreamy, we don't know how he spells his name.
The bottom.
This way is a raised panel. So you can see my panel is now the thickness of my stile and rail on the inside, and it's been hollowed out to fit in the groove of my stile and rail. So almost all traditionally built doors and panels have both. I have raised and flat, and the client just chooses which face they want to see. And there's my flat, back to flat. You can see, and I think, and Rory, you can remind us, if we went upstairs to look at the math, how are they making these panels all through the whole building exactly the same? Did we do that?
I don't think.
No, okay, good, we'll do that here in a minute. That panel, that panel, that panel, that panel, that panel are all exactly the same width. And this thing, I think, was on a set of stairs because it's on an angle in the Abergwit Ferry. And the carpenter had to decide how big to make the panels and the stiles to make this fit in, and all the math worked perfectly. Does that make sense? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this math together, and I'm gonna quiz you on it. I'm gonna work with you, but I need you to know this because this is the backbone of everything you're gonna do all second semester. So this works for tiling, ceiling tiles, stair rails, panels, anything that we need to be even in a house, which is a lot of stuff. This is exactly how we do it. So work with me on the concept here. When I do panels, first of all, I inherit this one distance. Just say there's a brick wall here and a brick wall at the end. That distance, I just come into work that morning and that distance is what it is. So I just inherit that. I don't have any control over that. And then I have clients that want paneling in between those two brick walls. So I have a stile, a panel, a stile, a panel, etc. And if I think of them in pairs, stile, panel, pair 1, stile, panel, pair 2, pair 3, pair 4, what's wrong at the end? I have an extra stile. Perfect. That's the whole key to the whole thing of learning that. So another couple things, and the short story is I'm going to give you a lot of free information or answers on the test because we have to make some assumptions. However, in real life, it's not too much different. You're not going to have a stile 6 feet wide. Why is that? I'm paying your bill, I'm the millionaire, you're putting panels in my house. Why don't you want to put 6 foot stiles in my house?
That's not the purpose.
Because it's weak, it's going to warp, it's going to twist, it's going to look gorgeous today, it's going to look like heck from that day forward. So we don't want that. We highly recommend, sir, that we don't put that in. We highly recommend we put something smaller. So we'll go with 50 millimeters, which is 2 inches. We're just making it up, but let's just go with that. And then I have a stile panel combo. You with me on that? So combo 1, combo 2, combo 3, and I'm gonna let go and you can put it down if you want. Okay, so I'll do the same exact example in the book just so that you can follow with your notes and then it makes sense. But I started with, and I need my calculator, excuse me for
No,
1 second.
page is he talking about?
Tyler, so we
Huh? 30?
Okay, so I have inherited this width, 2,700 millimeters. $2,700 millimeters. And
That's nice.
And I want 50 millimeter styles. Remember I already said that, up and down parts? So style equals 50 millimeters. And I know that the math doesn't work. You guys already identified that. When I add this up, I have pair 1, pair 2, pair 3, pair 4, pair 5, and then I have this one funky style. So I have to get rid of that. So 2,700 minus 50 is 2,650.
So the 50 is for the extra style?
The 50 is subtracting. I can't do math on that because I don't have even number of pairs. I have to get rid of him because my math won't work. It doesn't make sense.
And with the decision about the size of this style, you or the, or is that?
In real life, it would be you and the client. What I've done in real life is made this out of foam because it's dirt cheap and I can just use my razor knife and say, what if we had a style this wide and a panel that wide? And they'd look at it and say, could you make it a little smaller or a little bit bigger? But basically you're giving advice to
It's
the,
not a standard.
and it's not a standard. And to be honest, a building like this, no one would know, no one would care. You just make your best decision and go with that. Although you know you're never gonna get more than 4 inches, like that's ridiculous, you're gonna have problems. So you're probably between 1 and 4 inches. So you're always probably around 2, 2.5, 3 inches, give or take. Because even if you're in a gorgeous mansion, a 1 foot wide board's gonna warp and twist and you're not gonna wanna do that. So you're, within reason, you're locked in, kind of. So, but that would be your expertise to give that advice to the client. Is that okay? Okay. Let's just say that the panel equals 600. And we're just taking guesses. Now again, often we don't have much of a choice. If I'm building panels for Tyler's library at his house, I'm probably buying those panels out of plywood, and the widest I could get is 4 feet. So his panels are gonna be 4 feet or less. And typically, if you're gonna pay me to build a panel wall, having 2 panels here or 1 panel, what's the point? You're doing all this work and there's no beauty. So the more panels there are, the better, to a certain extent. So you're having that judgment call. But again, on the quiz, I'll help you out quite a bit. So my panel is 600. My style is 50. So a combo equals 650. These are all millimeters. And I have my total length less my style is 2,650, and I'm gonna divide it by combos. And that's where I need my calculator. Is equal to 4.06, we'll say 4.077. What does the book say? Yeah, 077. Okay? What do I have 4.077 of?
Pairs.
What I'm calling combos,
Plus style.
right? So I have 4.07 combos. This is critical for you to understand that. What's wrong with that number?
You have a decimal.
Yep. How many, I just built this for my client Tyler, how many .07 combo panels do I have here? 0. Because he'd have beauty, dinky little combo here. That doesn't make sense. So again, back to what I was saying is I'm doing my best bet of here's my best advice to you, ma'am, how we're gonna build your library in your house. And the math didn't work out quite right. So what I'll do is round. What I can do here is that's awful close to 4. Very, very close to 4. If it came out to 4.899, I would say I'm awful close to 5. So my general advice to you is whatever number you're closer to, round to that. So I'm closer to 4. I'm gonna have to erase this, I'm sorry.
But there's the size, they round up to 5.
They do round up? Yeah, it doesn't, there's no right or wrong. Let's just stick with that then. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's your answer. 7 is round, we'll just say round up. So therefore, 4.077 equals 5. Or approximately equal to 5. And then I have to do the math again. So 2,650 divided by 5. 2,650 divided by 5 equals 530. So what do I have 2,650 of? What is that number?
Millimeters
Minus,
minus the style on the end.
minus 1 style, good. What do I have 5 of? What's 5 represent?
Combos.
Panel style combos. What is 530? The width of a combo. Width of combo. Why is that important? Well, in real life, because you have to wrap your head around what the heck you're doing with this math. In the test, I might ask you, A, what is width of combo? And the answer is 530 millimeters. B, what is width of style?
50.
50. C, what is width of rail?
4, 8.
So, and the answer to that, just for your notes, so you have it, is 530 minus 50, which equals 480.
No, the rail is the full thing, so 2,700.
Width of style, sorry, style. Sorry. No, width of panel. Final answer, panel.
We got that.
Good? How many combos? That doesn't begin with W, it begins with H. How many combos equals 5? So this test question could be answered by asking any one or all of those questions at the end. Would be a good indicator of your firm understanding of that. Yeah.
So this would be like the client says, I don't know, I like it about this wide. And so you'd start with
Totally.
600 and then you'd figure out what works
Yeah.
for the actual wide.
Yep.
So it's mostly because the styles are predicted and the panels are easiest to change.
Yes, totally. I really don't recommend we go less than 2 inches. I really recommend we don't go more other than custom order, very, very expensive, it's gonna take a long time to get here. We're dealing with sheet goods 4 feet wide, so panels are gonna be 4 feet wide or less.
So you would have the client choose the style that they liked,
Yeah.
and then use that number to figure out your panel width?
That's right, and then if the client says, I want my panel 600 millimeters,
Then you
it's not
change the
really
style
gonna be
instead?
600 millimeters, it's gonna be a little bit bigger, a little bit shorter than that because of reality. Good? Let's just go for a quick walk, get your blood pumping, and I'll show you a couple things, and then we'll get right back to it.
Maybe we should close.
What?
Too far.